What will this mean for 2030 and crucially being able to meet our targets without the so-called Kyoto carryover?
Yeah, no, Tom, as you can see from those numbers, we've absolutely smashed our 2020 targets. 459 million tonnes, that's almost a year's worth of emissions. Very few countries in the world can boast that kind of outcome. Countries like Canada and New Zealand haven't met their targets. We have by a long, long way. 25% below the forecast when we came into government this year. 25%, and there were many pundits who said there was no way we were going to reach those targets. We've smashed them. Now, as we look forward to 2030, which was your question, we're 16.6% down on our 2005 baseline. That's well progressed towards our 26% target. Yep. Much better again than any of the pundits thought. And we've done this without a carbon tax. This is the crucial point. I mean, their forecasts when we came into government were with a carbon tax. We've got rid of the carbon tax and we're smashing our targets. We're doing it through technology, not taxation. That's the focus. And as we look forward to 2030, of course, we'll put out our updated annual forecast, which we do before Christmas each year in the coming weeks. But you can see from these numbers we're doing extremely well, independent of the pandemic. And as I say, this is not, we don't need to become central planners and take over the economy. We just do it in the way good Liberal national governments do, which is deploying technology, the enterprise of Australians, to get these emissions down. They've done it in the past. As I say, people will always be sceptical about the future, but we're very optimistic about our progress.
What about that 2030, though, the Kyoto carryover? At this stage, we are still allowing ourselves, if you like, to use that. At what point would you be able to say, look, everything's so well on track, we will commit to not using that carryover? Because that would be a significant thing to take to an international fora, for example.
Yeah, well, look, we'll only use it if we need to. But a little bit of history here, Tom. Labor, when they negotiated the 2012 Kyoto Agreement, fought that carryover should be available if needed. We've always stuck with that principle, but we've also always sought to achieve it without carryover. We achieved the Kyoto 2020 targets without carryover by a long, long way, and we will seek to do the same for 2030. But we also believe strongly that if Australia overachieves, as we always have, unlike so many other countries in the world, Tom, including many countries in Europe, we should be able to use it if we need to, but our progress is extremely strong.
You reserve the right to use it right up until, who knows? I'm not going to be too bold and say you'll never be Minister in 2029, but it's a long way away. But you're saying we'll keep that until the year of 2030? There's no reason to jettison it beforehand?
Well, look, you saw how we dealt with it in the Kyoto era. It became very apparent a number of years back we weren't going to need it.
But
it's more than apparent now that we haven't needed it, of course, and that's our approach. The other point I'd make here is that we have a strong 2030 target, and those opposite us, the Labor Party, don't, Tom. And this is a crucial point. We're clear about our targets. We know we're going to get there through technology taxation. We have the track record. We've achieved it without a carbon tax, and we're confident we can do the same going forward.
2050 net zero, the line we're getting from Scott Morrison now is we'll get there as soon as possible. What does that mean? Does that depend on cost, for example? Because we can get there. It's about whether you have a desire to what it might cost. Is that the big thing in your mind?
So the important point here is that any target we set or go after, or any outcome we go after, must be done through technology, not taxation. That's the crucial point. We don't want to raise the price of electricity. We want to make sure we have affordable, reliable energy in this country. We don't want to destroy manufacturing jobs. And so the way to achieve these outcomes is to deploy technologies that can bring the cost of lower emitting energy sources down without raising the cost of traditional fuel sources. And this has been central to our approach since we got into government in 2013. It's worked. Now, as I say, against all the pundits, it's worked, and it will work in the future as it has worked in the past. And the reason for this, Tom, it's hugely important. Humans solve hard problems by enterprise and deployment of technology. It's how we've always done it. And that's how we'll do this, and that means we won't impose taxes.
So I understand that you're not saying to do that, but in terms of cost, cost can also come from government. You've got a technology roadmap. You can decide how much money to put into subsidies, to put into underwriting. So again, what does as soon as possible actually mean?
So the targets...
What's the limitation on you in terms of the possibility there?
Yeah, so the targets that really matter here, that will drive when as soon as possible are the technology targets that we've outlined in our technology investment roadmap. So getting the cost of production of hydrogen to below $2 a kilogram. Getting the cost of measuring soil carbon down to below $3 per hectare per year. Getting the cost of production of low emission steel down to under $900 a tonne.
Right.
I mean, they're the targets we've set, and there's others, but they're the targets we've set. We know that those targets will allow us, will enable us to get our emissions down at a rapid pace. Right. But more importantly, and this is absolutely crucial in this debate, they will enable getting emissions down across the world. So that's why these are the targets that really count, and it's why we keep emphasising.
So what you're saying is, here's the money, here's what we're putting in, we've got the technology roadmap. The pace at which we get there depends on how good and how quickly the technology evolves. Correct. Is that what you're saying? So you've got a finite expenditure you'll map out, and you've mapped out so far. Yep, here's how much we spend. The pace at which we get there depends on the technology.
Yes. And
that's what it relies on. So does that get to a point, though, where you consider we could spend more money on the technology and get there faster?
Well, certainly we're spending, we're redeploying, reallocating and directing our R&D investment, whether it's in ARENA, the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, CSIRO, even the way we're working with the universities in a way that's focused on those targets. So there's a lot of money there that we...
All right, so that's the pot of money for now.
And that's very significant. I mean, if you take our $18 billion that we direct through some of those organisations, not all of them, and then what we expect the private sector to commit, which is 3 times what we're committing, because that's our experience. These are very significant dollars going into R&D. Okay. Now, the key for us is to collaborate with countries around the world, whether it's the UK, the United States, Japan, who's enormous interest in Japan in hydrogen, for instance, work with them to get these costs of these emerging technologies down. That allows us to build these industries without destroying jobs.
All right.
And protect our existing industry.
A couple of quick things before we go. Joe Biden is putting the US back in the Paris climate deal. He says climate change is the #1 issue facing humanity. Do you agree?
Well, I certainly think it's an important issue, and we welcome... Look, I'm not going to get into sort of what's first and what's second. There's lots of issues we're facing this pandemic right now.
It's not clear whether one in your mind.
Right now, the pandemic is top of mind for Australians. There's no question about that, Tom. Look, getting into this kind of ordering makes no sense. I mean, you're the minister. But look, what I will say... No, well, let me finish. You keep interrupting me, Tom. Let me finish. My point is we welcomed the United States to the Paris Agreement. We've been in the Paris Agreement from the start. The United States, of course, hasn't in recent years. And we welcome them to it. And, of course, there's enormous areas for us to work together. If you look at carbon capture and storage, Joe Biden has said they're going to double down on it. And there's 58 projects around the world, carbon capture and storage, almost half of them in the US. The biggest projects here in Australia. We'll work very closely with the United States on this. It has to be a priority. There's no question about that. Right. And we've made it a priority. And
just finally, electric cars. We've got 2 states now talking about going with the tax. Now, you hate the taxation approach. You don't like new taxes. What do you make of this?
Well, we've got no plan to impose a tax. But look,
what do you make
they're choices that have been made by the states. If you look at our electric vehicle strategy, it's about enabling choice. It's about making sure consumers have that choice. We've got just over $70 million for our Future Fuels Fund, which is about getting the infrastructure in place that can support people making their choices, not forcing them to buy an electric vehicle. If they want to buy an electric vehicle, great, go for it. Right. And we're making sure the infrastructure and support is in place so they can make those choices.
You're pressed for time. I appreciate you coming this morning. Talk soon.
Thanks, Tom.